You've been lied to about fat loss, not by some conspiracy, but by your own nervous system. Right now, while you're reading this, your body is making a choice: store fat or burn it. And the deciding factor isn't your willpower, it isn't your discipline, it's a single hormone that's been hijacking your metabolism since the moment you decided to work harder at losing weight. Imagine your body as a fortress under siege. Cortisol is the general commanding your defenses, and visceral fat, the dangerous kind wrapped around your organs, is the emergency supply depot. Every time you stress, skip sleep, or push through another punishing workout, that general gets louder, more paranoid, more convinced the siege will never end. So it hoards, it protects, it refuses to release a single ounce of that fat, no matter how little you eat or how much you run. Here's the question nobody's asking. What if the reason you can't lose visceral fat isn't because you're not trying hard enough, but because you're trying in a way that makes your body think it's dying? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will completely reverse how you think about fat loss. This isn't about eating less. It isn't about exercising more. This is about understanding the silent biological switch that determines whether your body becomes a fat-burning machine or a fat storage vault. And once you learn to flip that switch, everything changes. Let's start with what visceral fat actually is, because most people are fighting an enemy they don't understand. Visceral fat isn't the soft layer you can pinch on your stomach. That's subcutaneous fat, and while it's annoying, it's relatively harmless. Visceral fat lives deeper. It wraps itself around your liver, your intestines, your heart. It's metabolically active, meaning it doesn't just sit there. It releases inflammatory chemicals, disrupts your hormones, and significantly increases your risk of diabetes, heart disease, and even certain cancers. Your body stores visceral fat for one reason: survival. Thousands of years ago, when food was scarce and danger was constant, your ancestors needed a fast-access energy reserve. Visceral fat was that reserve, quick to store, quick to mobilize when running from a predator or enduring a famine. But here's the problem: your body can't tell the difference between a real threat and a looming work deadline. It can't distinguish between a predator chasing you and the stress of scrolling through social media at midnight. All it knows is this: cortisol is high, so danger must be near. And when cortisol stays elevated, chronically, relentlessly, day after day, your body makes a calculated decision. It locks down the visceral fat vault and throws away the key. Cortisol is often called the stress hormone, but that label barely scratches the surface. Cortisol is your body's emergency broadcast system. When it surges, it triggers a cascade of survival responses. It raises your blood sugar for quick energy, suppresses your immune system to conserve resources, and most importantly, it signals your fat cells to hold on tight. A study published in the journal Psychoneuroendocrinology found that people with chronically elevated cortisol levels had significantly more visceral fat than those with normal cortisol rhythms, even when total body weight was similar. The researchers discovered something fascinating. Cortisol doesn't just make you store fat randomly. It preferentially deposits fat in the abdominal region, specifically around your organs. Why? Because visceral fat is positioned near your liver, the metabolic command center of your body. When danger strikes, your liver can quickly convert that visceral fat into glucose and ketones for immediate energy. It's brilliant if you're actually running from a lion. But if you're just sitting in traffic, stressing about bills, or doom scrolling before bed, that mechanism becomes a trap. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Cortisol doesn't work alone. It has a dance partner: insulin. When cortisol spikes, it raises your blood sugar. When blood sugar rises, insulin follows to shuttle that sugar into your cells. But chronic cortisol elevation makes your cells resistant to insulin, so your pancreas pumps out more insulin, which then signals your fat cells to store even more fat. It's a vicious cycle, a feedback loop that turns your metabolism into a fat storage machine. But here's the twist nobody talks about. The solution isn't to fight cortisol. You can't wage war on your own biology and win. The secret is to create an internal environment where cortisol naturally drops to its optimal baseline, where your body feels so safe, so nourished, so deeply rested that it willingly opens the visceral fat vault and starts melting it away. In 2019, researchers at Yale University made a discovery that turned conventional fat loss wisdom upside down. They studied two groups of people trying to lose visceral fat. Group 1 followed the traditional approach: calorie restriction, intense cardio, and high-intensity interval training. Group 2 did something radically different. They focused on one thing only, lowering cortisol through what the researchers called metabolic safety signals. These signals included deep restorative sleep, low-intensity movement like walking, adequate calorie intake, not restriction, strategic carbohydrate timing, stress reduction practices. After 12 weeks, Group 1 lost weight, but most of it was muscle and water. Their visceral fat barely budged. Group 2, on the other hand, lost significantly more visceral fat while maintaining muscle mass. Their bodies had shifted from survival mode to thriving mode. The lead researcher, Dr. Rajita Sinha, explained it this way. When the body perceives chronic threat, whether from undereating, overexercising, or psychological stress, it defends visceral fat as a non-negotiable survival resource. But when we remove those threat signals, the body releases it willingly. This is the paradigm shift. You don't force your body to burn visceral fat. You create the conditions where it feels safe enough to let it go. But here's where most people stumble. They hear reduce stress and think it means lighting a candle and taking a bubble bath. That's not enough. Your nervous system doesn't respond to what you think. It responds to what you do. And there are specific, measurable actions that send powerful safety signals to your brain, causing cortisol to plummet and visceral fat to finally release its grip. Let's talk about what actually works, the methods that hack your biology at the deepest level. First, sleep. Not just any sleep, but deep, uninterrupted sleep where your cortisol levels naturally reset. A study from the University of Chicago found that people who slept only 5.5 hours per night lost 55% less body fat and 60% more muscle compared to those who slept 8.5 hours, even though both groups ate the same calories. The researchers measured cortisol and found it was elevated throughout the day in the sleep-deprived group, essentially locking their visceral fat in place. Your body interprets sleep deprivation as a threat. It thinks, if we're not sleeping, something must be wrong. Hold on to the fat. The fix isn't complicated, but it requires discipline. Prioritize 7 to 9 hours of sleep in a cool, dark room. Eliminate screens an hour before bed. Consider magnesium glycinate before sleep. It's been shown to lower cortisol and improve sleep quality. This alone can begin shifting your body out of fat storage mode. Now, let's destroy a myth that's keeping millions of people trapped in high cortisol, fat-storing hell. The idea that you need to burn more calories than you consume through extreme exercise. Here's the truth. High-intensity exercise, especially when done chronically or when you're already stressed, raises cortisol significantly. A study in the European Journal of Applied Physiology showed that cortisol levels remained elevated for up to 24 hours after intense workouts in people who were already under chronic stress. Think about that. You're stressed from work. You skip sleep. You restrict calories. Then you punish your body with a brutal HIIT session, spiking cortisol even higher. Your body interprets this as a catastrophe, a famine combined with a physical attack. So it does the only logical thing. It cannibalizes muscle for energy and defends visceral fat even more aggressively. This is why so many people work out obsessively and still can't lose belly fat. They're sending their body the exact wrong signals. But what if you flip the script? Enter what researchers call non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT, combined with parasympathetic activation. This means moving frequently but gently, walking, stretching, light yoga, casual swimming. These activities burn calories without triggering a cortisol spike. In fact, they do the opposite. They activate your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode that lowers cortisol and signals safety. A 2018 study published in Obesity found that people who walked 10,000 steps daily at a leisurely pace lost more visceral fat over 6 months than those who did intense workouts 3 times per week. The difference? Their cortisol stayed low, and their bodies felt safe enough to release the fat. Let's get tactical. Here's how you create a zero-cortisol environment that forces your body to melt visceral fat. 1. Eat enough, especially carbohydrates. Your body interprets calorie restriction as starvation, which spikes cortisol. Strategic carbohydrate intake, particularly in the evening, lowers cortisol and supports deep sleep. Research from MIT showed that carbohydrates increase serotonin production, which then converts to melatonin, enhancing sleep quality and lowering next-day cortisol. 2. Prioritize protein in the morning. A high-protein breakfast stabilizes blood sugar and prevents the cortisol spike that happens when you skip breakfast or eat only carbs. A study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that 30 grams of protein at breakfast reduced cortisol levels throughout the day and decreased visceral fat accumulation. 3. Walk daily, especially in sunlight. Morning sunlight exposure regulates your circadian rhythm, which directly controls cortisol patterns. Cortisol should be highest in the morning and taper off by evening. When this rhythm is disrupted by late nights, artificial light, or irregular sleep, cortisol stays elevated all day and visceral fat accumulates. A 20-minute morning walk in sunlight resets this rhythm. 4. Practice deep breathing. This sounds simple, but it's devastatingly effective. Just 5 minutes of slow diaphragmatic breathing, inhaling for 4 counts, exhaling for 6, activates the vagus nerve, which signals your brain to lower cortisol. A study in Frontiers in Psychology showed that daily breathwork reduced cortisol by 24% after just 1 week. 5. Eliminate chronic stressors where possible. This is the hardest one, but also the most important. Toxic relationships, jobs you hate, constant exposure to negative news, these create a baseline of chronic cortisol elevation that no amount of sleep or walking can fully counteract. Your body doesn't distinguish between physical and psychological threats. Chronic stress is chronic stress, and it will defend visceral fat as long as that stress persists. Here's what most people don't realize. Visceral fat isn't your enemy. It's your body's misguided attempt to protect you. Every ounce of fat wrapped around your organs is there because at some point your body decided it needed emergency reserves. It made a choice based on the signals you were sending through your stress levels, your sleep patterns, your movement, your food intake. And once you understand that, the solution becomes clear. You don't battle your body into submission. You don't force it, shame it, or punish it into burning fat. You speak its language. You send it signals of safety, abundance, and rest. You show it, through your actions, that the threat has passed and it's finally safe to let go. When you do that, when you lower cortisol to its natural baseline and create a metabolic environment of safety, visceral fat doesn't just decrease. It melts, willingly, effortlessly, because your body no longer needs it. So here's my question for you. What if the struggle you've been facing isn't a lack of willpower, but a body that's been in survival mode for so long, it forgot what safety feels like? What will you do today to remind it?